Hello and welcome to AP Macroeconomics, designed for students who are studying on their own during this period of coronavirus isolation. In part 2 today, we will be introducing the circular flow model. And we're going to do this with a very simple version of circular flow. We're just going to put in two entities right now. The two entities will be people, like you and I, or if we were doing this in econospeak, we could call people consumers. And we're going to add in businesses. Or we could call businesses the producers, if you prefer. When we're doing circular flow, we're interested in the relationship between different entities in the economy. So, for example, we know that people give money to businesses, and they do that in order to get goods and services produced by those businesses. Meanwhile, we also see money flowing from businesses to people as businesses purchase our labor or as they pay rent on our land or buy raw materials from us that exist on our land or something like that. So this is it. This is a really simple closed system for circular flow. But this tells us an important idea, and that is that money goes around and around and around within the economy. If we're looking at an area where I live right now, we are 40 miles from a major city. When I first moved here, I was confused on how the local economy could function at all because it doesn't seem like we really produce that much. You know, we have like stores and restaurants, and somehow people are always spending money, but like, where does the money come from? But the truth is, if you have just a few people who leave our community and maybe they work in the city and they bring a little bit of money back to our community, they might spend that money at a restaurant. The restaurant then pays their employees, and those employees then go shopping at our Walmart, and the Walmart pays their employees, and those people then, go to, the local ice cream store, and so it goes around and around and around. Every dollar that gets inserted to this system is going to get spent over and over and over again. So one new dollar injected into this will create many dollars in GDP growth. And we can draw it like this for our own community, or we can draw it like this for our whole country. I want to introduce an important formula that's related to this. The formula we're going to focus on today is MV equals PY. Some of these variables you already know. I want to focus on the PY for a moment first. If we go back to our aggregate supply and demand graph, we already have P and Y on this graph. And so P is our price level and Y is our real GDP. And where those two meet at our equilibrium, if we were to multiply our price level times our real GDP, that would give us our nominal GDP. So I can put here that PY is also equal to our nominal GDP. The M in our MV equals PY, the M would be the money supply. So if we were to consider, for example, right now in 2020, we expect our nominal GDP this year to be around $21 trillion. Actually, thanks to the coronavirus, it's probably not going to be $21 trillion. It might be a lot less than that this year. But initially, we were expecting it $21 trillion for US nominal GDP. If we were to come back to the MV, if we were to have, let's say, 7 trillion as our money supply, then we've got this variable V, which is going to finish our formula. And V is actually going to be what we call the velocity of money. So if we take a look at our circular flow, the velocity of money refers to how fast money moves throughout this system. If we're looking at our numbers for this year, based on what I have drawn up here, apparently, if we're looking at 7 trillion times the velocity equaling 21 trillion, then the velocity must be 21 trillion over 7 trillion, or 3. That number 3 would tell us that the average dollar is circulating around this system 3 times within the year. Velocity is kind of a confusing concept for me. I understand that it is pretty close to a constant, and the constant value that it has actually is really close to 3. I would think that as the economy changes, as we do more online shopping, as we deal more and more with electronic currency, I would expect V to change. But I'm not an expert on this, and I've been told that it's basically a constant. So we're going to treat velocity of money as a constant in this class, and we'll know that its value is usually close to 3. So anyway, if we were to take $7 trillion, our money supply, and see that $7 trillion all being spent 3 times, that would give us a total of $21 trillion, or our nominal GDP. I want to do just a little bit more with MV and PY before we wrap up today's lesson. When we take a look at MV and PY, we can apply this to monetary policy. We have the traditional economists who would like to point out that real GDP is based on 3 important variables. Those 3 variables are land, labor, and capital. And so according to traditional economists, classical economists, if we were to increase a value like M, if we increase the money supply, and we know that V is a constant, and they see real GDP as a constant, this formula tells us that if we increase the money supply, we'll have to see prices going up for this formula to remain true. So according to classical economists, an increase in the money supply gives us an increase in prices, and that's it. When we look at Keynesian economists would agree that V is a constant, but Keynesian economists would have argued that if we increase the money supply, real GDP can actually go up, and prices might go up as well. We know that all of this is actually true. If we were to take a look at a quick graph for aggregate supply and demand, I'm going to do it real fast here. We know that in the short run, if we increase the money supply, Keynesian economists are correct. When we increase the money supply, aggregate demand will go up. As aggregate demand goes up, we will move to the right for real GDP. We will also see prices going up. But when we look at this problem in the long run, we know that when we've had some inflation, workers eventually demand higher wages. And as they demand higher wages, sorry for the mess, we eventually get a shift in aggregate aggregate supply. And when we get that leftward shift in aggregate supply, we end up back at the same real GDP, but with even higher prices. So when we're taking a look at classical economists, we can say that classical economists are correct in the short run in that an increase in the money supply. Wait, I said that wrong. Let's get back. We can say that classical economists are correct when they say that in the long run, an increase in the money supply just gives us an increase in prices. Whereas Keynesian economists are correct in saying that an increase in the money supply will give us an increase in both prices and real GDP. There's more we can do with our circular flow model. I want to come back to this and do some specific problems with fiscal policy. So tune in for part 3, where we'll take a look at spending and tax multipliers.